Welcome to The Radical Bureaucrat, a podcast for people who want to change institutions from the inside.
I'm Sam Rosaldo, and I believe that good government matters, like, a lot.
Yeah, me too. I'm Abram Garrett, and I believe that complicated problems never have simple solutions.
Oh, me too.
If you work in a bureaucracy like we do,
Or if you care about bureaucracies,
then we think you'll get a lot out of our podcast.
The Radical Bureaucrat.
Today we're going to do something a little different.
A lot different.
All right, a lot different. We're about to watch and reflect on a movie, which we haven't done before. I mean, we've watched movies before. We're doing
Not
it
on
with
this podcast.
Not on this podcast, though. We're doing it with two of our very favorite people.
That's right. The movie is Brazil, a British movie made in 1985 that has been described as a dystopian fantasy/satire on bureaucratic society.
But before we get to that, let's tell the listeners who we're with.
So we're with two very radical friends of ours, Patrick G. Williamson and Toni Smith-Thompson. And we'll start with Patrick. Patrick, can you tell us a little bit about what you're about?
Absolutely. What I'm about is this podcast. I'll start off by saying, I find that I was looking for this outlet before even realizing that you all were having these conversations. And so it was just like a breath of fresh air to hear the work that you all were doing. And you've been so inclusive with everybody in terms of the process of building. And so I always respect that. My name's Patrick. Yeah, absolutely. My name's Patrick. I work for the New York City Department of Education and the Department of Teaching and Learning. I've been there for about 3 years, and I've worked in the Office of Post-Secondary Readiness, the Office of Leadership, and now I'm in the Office of Teacher Development with a program called New York City Men Teach. I am also a poet and a photographer and a lover of life. I'm learning so much from just interpersonal connections. I think that everything that I do in life will be revolved around interpersonal connections and proper representation, specifically of people of color. And then I also have a podcast.
You do.
That I've been working on, that we've been collaborating on, sharing best practices. It's called 3 Educated Brothas, a podcast about all things education through the perspectives of 3 black men in the field. Check it out. We're on Apple Music and SoundCloud. And we're always looking to build, so that's what we're doing here too. So
definitely check it out. Excellent podcast, Brothas with an A.
Yeah,
and the number 3.
Yeah, the number 3, Brothas with an A.
Got to keep it, for the culture.
Yeah,
the culture.
definitely an inspiration for me and Abram. So.
Yeah, agreed. So Toni, what about you? Can you give us the brief intro?
Sure. I also am very excited about this podcast, and I'm really excited to be here. My name is Toni. I work for the New York Civil Liberties Union as an organizer, and I've been there over 7 years, and I haven't always worked as an organizer there. And it's not what you would typically think of as a bureaucracy, but it's a large nonprofit organization, and so certainly has elements of bureaucracy in it, and that there are always so many small moving pieces that require many people to produce outcomes. And so I would say my life goal, I guess, is to hold a mirror up to America's face and have it be honest about who it is and the values that it actually enacts in practice, as opposed to the values that it espouses on paper and verbally. And I do that in my job. I mostly focus on our campaigns to strengthen and protect public education. But outside of my job, I also speak and write on other issues of equity and justice, including freedom of speech, and sickle cell anemia, the healthcare system. And so whatever life experiences I'm having, I'm looking for ways to use those experiences in order to kind of shed light on the hypocrisies that I see.
That's awesome. Great intros. Thank you both so much for being here. You both are inspirations, so we're really excited. And y'all who are out there listening, if you haven't heard from these folks before, you will.
Yeah, you have this to look for. Yeah,
you can Google it.
Oh, shucks.
So what we're going to do is we're going to watch this movie, Brazil.
Woo.
And
then we'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
Yeah. Catch y'all.
All right, so we're running credits on Brazil. We just finished a very out there movie.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I wish everyone could see the expressions on our faces. Lots of eyebrows raised, mouths agape.
Lots of questions.
Lots
So
of
many
questions.
questions.
So many questions. So the movie focuses on the protagonist, Sam Lowry, who works for Central Services. Central Services meaning like the large government apparatus.
Any layers?
Many layers,
lots of layers.
yes. And he keeps having this dream of rescuing a damsel in distress. But yeah, what are your initial reactions?
I feel like the movie ended 5 times.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting with the final actual ending.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I'm left with is that it ends in a dream state.
Mm-hmm.
And what that brought up for me is the ways that people have to escape from the daily grind and like the tortures of their daily life through entertainment or sports or religion or whatever. And there were a lot of references to Christianity in here. But how he's like dead at the end, but not.
Mm-hmm.
In like the state of kind of perpetual undeadness.
Definitely.
What about you, Patrick?
No, I feel the 100% the same way. The amount of metaphors that from the mother wearing a shoe on her head, like how that's like upside down, and like, you know,
Uh-huh.
I think that what it was rooted in heavily was the feeling that Sam had in terms of being like feeling as if he's the only one that is seeing through the veil or seeing the ridiculous world that he's living in. Like, you know, I think that Tuttle, his name was Tuttle, or
Yeah.
he was like Superman in this.
Yeah,
movie.
yeah,
Like,
he was.
He was great because like when
Yeah.
he comes around, it's like almost validation.
Tuttle played
for-
by Robert De Niro.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Harry Tuttle, heating engineer at your service.
Tuttle? Are you from Central Services? I called Central Services.
Well, they're a little overworked these days. Luckily, I intercepted your call.
Adding layers on layers. Yeah, no, just seeing the feeling of feeling like, you know, you're seeing something that is not being validated by like the system or by the masses can have you feeling like you're going insane. And then like seeing a lot of the metaphors or seeing his reaction. I think one of the best scenes in it was when the explosion happened in the restaurant.
Yes.
And then like they continued on with conversation as if it
Yeah.
wasn't happening, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Let's talk about like one thing for a second. Let's talk about that notion of normalcy and like who accepts what's normal and who doesn't. And maybe it would help if at this point let's just stop for a second and instead of like interpreting, just talk about in the movie who's accepting of normalcy and who isn't. So anyone want to help with that?
Sometimes normalcy can be, you know, overt or covert, or normalcy can be, normalcy can look like silence, or it can look like assimilation that is right in front of your face and you can kind of see it. And I feel like the mother served the purpose of like, you know, well, you should really get this good job.
Sam, it's time for you to grow up and accept responsibility. Your poor father would be appalled at your lack of promotion. Whew.
Mother, I just wish you would stop interfering. I don't want promotion. I'm happy where I am.
No, you're not. Jack Lint is a lesson to you. He doesn't have your brains, but he's got the ambition. You haven't got the ambition. Luckily, you've got me and the deputy minister. Mr. Helpman was very close to your
Please,
father.
Mrs. Lowry, don't get upset. Mr. Lowry, please wait in reception. You're giving her wrinkles.
You see?
I think it was the,
Just try and relax, Mrs. Lowry.
there was one scene where one of his co-workers was like, oh, why would you want to be in this office? Like there's no, basically saying there's no room for social mobility, or like you won't get exposed in that way. And it really touched back to like the individualistic nature that can sometimes be in these settings where it's like you have the broader work that you're doing, and then you have your individual, you know, inclinations to provide for yourself or your family or what it may be. And I feel like that was a huge that was kind of an underlying value of the normalcy that was expected in this world. It was kind of like, why would you do anything for anybody else? Like, what? You know? So I feel like the mom was like always on his back. Like, you know, she was the reason for the promotion, and she was, you know, involved with Mr. Hellman, and, you know, like she epitomized kind of that expectation.
Yeah, what you just said made me realize what's missing from normal in this reality was there was zero sense of community anywhere. There were these two stark sectors of society, the people who worked for central offices and then the people outside of it who were targeted and victimized. But nowhere did you get a sense that people were in it together, that they were for each other. You have the mom's best friend who's dying from bad plastic surgery, literally
slowly
dying
in front of us.
But everyone keeping up the pretense that it's going to get better and that it's worth the risk.
Right. Yeah. Well, so the mother figure is really interesting. And to Sam's question, right? Like, one person who doesn't buy into the normalcy is the wife of the guy that gets taken away. Basically, the wrong person gets taken away because of a weird error in the bureaucracy. Somebody gets arrested. It's not
like
really
there's
them.
a home invasion.
I hereby inform you under powers entrusted to me under Section 47, Paragraph 7 of Council Order Number 438476 that Mr. Buttle, Archibald, residing at 412 North Tower, Shangri-La Towers, has been invited to assist the Ministry of Information with certain inquiries, and that he is liable to certain financial obligations as specified in Council Order RB/CZ/907/X. Sign here, please. There. Thank you. Same again, please. Just there. Press harder this time. Good.
Oh, what this is all about.
That is your receipt for your husband. Thank you. And this is my receipt for your receipt.
Mrs. Buttle?
Yeah.
They get the wrong guy, but they don't recognize their error until later.
Right.
That's it. Nothing to worry about.
Right, it's Tuttle downstairs who can worry, eh?
Tuttle? His name's Buttle. There must be some mistake.
Mistake?
We don't make mistakes. Bloody typical. They've gone back to metric without telling us.
And then
most of what people are doing is trying to erase the error, but nobody is acknowledging that there's like this person who's been tortured and like interrogated and has died.
Yep.
Until the wife is like, "Where's the body?" And like that's the like. And it's this really gut-wrenching scene. Like,
well, because Sam, our hero, our protagonist, right, goes out because he wants to correct the error. So he wants to give her this refund. Check.
Because when you get arrested, you get charged for the cost of arresting you.
And he thinks he's being a good bureaucrat.
Yeah. He's doing, and he even says, he's like, you know, I don't usually do this. Like, I don't have to come and do it. I'm kind of like doing you a favor. Right?
It's Christmas.
It's Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
And she's like, where's my husband? Like, he's dead, isn't he? Where's his body? Right? Yeah. And so it's interesting to me that those are two kind of mother figures in the movie, right? There's a few people in the film who have not bought into this pure individualism thing, and who are just kind of like more recognizably human, right? Who are like, where's my husband, right? Or are you okay, right?
And having those feelings is, you know, when the masses are on one side, like her reaction is probably the most human reaction out of like all of the individuals that we saw, and the result of having kind of a human reaction is almost immobility. Like she was just staring out the window after everything happened. She's paralyzed because, you know, she's probably closer connected to humanity than the rest of society was. Right. And it, you know, that's almost like Baldwinian in the sense of like, to be, you know, awoken and aware of the injustices is to be in a constant state of rage, or in her case, you know, just immobilizing
helplessness,
despair,
like despondency. I was just last night at the workshop for a nonprofit here in the city called Epic. What is it? Epic Theater Company. Shout out to Epic. We'll post in the show notes who Epic is. But they do this program with high school students. There's lots of silliness. It is high school students, and yet also like these moments that just kind of hit you right in the gut. And there was one where the kids did this really weird thing, and there was like 3 or 4 kids, and they almost, you see like a choreographed thing where like multiple people's arms and sort of stuff, and they kind of look like one thing. So they did that, and then they all said in unison like, "We are the system." And then a parent comes and is like, "Oh, I need to find the schools that have peanut free lunches because my kid has a peanut allergy." And they're like, "Oh, you got to go to room 230." And the parent walks off stage. And then the students like reconfigure themselves into like a different shape as a group. And then the person comes in and they're like, "Welcome, we're here to serve you," or something like that. Wow. And it was this like really crazy moment of like, this is why we're doing the podcast. Because there are people who are the system and who are saying, it's our pleasure to serve you, and yet are doing stuff that's like, sending crazy people in circles, right? And like crazy inducing. Yeah. And like, it isn't as if the vast majority of that is not like ill-intentioned. Right. Nobody is like trying to like send you in circles. At least I don't think so. And yet there is something very profound about being complicit in the system. And like, that's exactly what this podcast is supposed to be about. Because like, we're trying to figure out, how do we be in the system that we have to comply with, and yet try to figure out how to make it more for people, for humans.
And we don't want to fall, going along with that, because that's so important, because we don't want to fall trapped to, it's easy to look at the system and see the flaws in it and automatically say that everything about that system is problematic. I feel like in certain circumstances that can be applied to, let's say, whiteness. Like, there are elements that we tie to whiteness that are really just tied to access to information, or like these broader logic or whatever it may be, but because it has been denied to communities for so long, like, you can kind of look at things and be like, wow, well, that's kind of like their thing, and they're not us, and we don't want to be them, so we're gonna start our own thing that can't have any overlapping values.
And like, even the way we talk about like organizing, and how do you structure organizing, and like, how do you do it in a way that doesn't just play into the norms, and like, as soon as you fundraise, what happens? Like, we have these conversations, right? But like, I mean, some of that, like, it's good to have resources to do things. Like, so like, you can't throw it all out, but like, a lot of it is so, to use an overused word, problematic, right? And like, I don't want that, but I kind of need, I don't know how else to organize a thing.
Or I want a nuanced version. I want a version that sees my reality in the structure of it, the foundation of it. Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that comes up a lot at work for me, and just more broadly about bureaucracies, is when you're organizing a large institution, you have to have so many smaller pieces.
Right.
And when everybody is responsible for their small piece, the goal becomes the piece and not the goal. And so in this movie, everyone's goal, I mean, what kept sitting with me in this movie was how out of proportion the concerns were for like the dire considerations for not getting a form filled out properly, or or like a refund check that indicated a mistake. And that was like a life or death matter. Whereas life or death matters was like, but why are you talking about your dead husband? I'm here to give you your refund check. So there was this very disproportionate response on both ends because people in the bureaucracy were so far from the ultimate purpose, which is like to serve a society.
You're just kind of fighting to have your voice heard. You're like in the line of people behind the boss, like, hey, what about this? What about this? You're so focused on your like slip of paper or whatever, and like moving it forward.
That's how you make meaning of your work, right?
Right.
That's what workplace politics is. Yeah. Well, I think we should talk about the end of the movie. So I'm just gonna give
spoiler alert.
Yeah.
It's been out for like 40 years, so the statute of limitations is up.
You've had your time to watch it.
33 to be exact. So I might misdescribe this, so you guys jump in, right? But at the end of the movie, Sam gets captured. He finally got the girl, but he gets taken out of bed with her and captured and put in this torture chair. And the main torturer, who comes out with this horrific Chucky-like mask, but he knows who it is. It's an old friend of his named Jack.
Jack?
Jack. Shut up. And just when Jack is about to begin torturing him for a confession, he gets shot in the head.
Please, Jack, no!
And that's where Tuttle comes in. And
with a bunch of commandos.
G.I.
Joe style.
Yep. There's a whole chase sequence, and in the end, Sam appears to take off. And at that point, my friend Genevieve, who was here, was about to get up to turn the lights on because we thought it might be over. But no, it's not over.
It's not over yet. Yeah.
Because then it turns out that it's a dream. And then you
not
hear
just a dream, but like a psychotic break.
Yes, yeah. and you hear Jack and the head guy,
deputy minister of information,
say, "We lost him."
Yep.
Right, and he's off somewhere else, and he's humming the Brazil song, which is what the movie is named after. This song,
vowing he'll return to Brazil. Yeah.
Okay, wait. I just had another thought when you just said we lost him.
Yeah.
Then could that mean something else, that he's not lost like dead, but lost from the system?
Yeah.
Like maybe that alternative dream state is an alternative real state.
Sure. I mean, this movie
I
could.
Like that.
Yeah. I'm sure this movie could riff for another 2 hours on the dream state.
Well, it's not totally hopeless because he's got a little he looks peaceful, right?
He's peaceful,
and it's not. It's not. There's a sense in which it's not a Hollywood ending, but it's not like a dark ending either.
Right.
I mean,
maybe a better ending than him continuing to do his day job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What it ends.
Fair point.
What it strikes me as is an ending that is utterly realistic, and it sometimes that is the most discomfortable thing to sit with at the end of a movie is or uncomfortable thing to sit with is just the fact that is what I'm probably gonna go to work tomorrow with, or it's like, wow, you didn't fantasize this at all. Like I have to sit with that.
Well, it made me think of what you said earlier though about, do we have to throw out all parts of the system? And I think because when he was in his dream state and he's escaping with Tuttle, he blows up the whole fucking building.
Yeah,
right.
He does.
And I was watching that and I was like, oh wow, like there's no rocking the boat and still staying in it here. Like it's either like
there's no more boat.
There's no getting a seat at the table. Like you have to burn the shit down. And like that is that the message of the movie? And then if you don't, then you're gonna your material conditions aren't gonna change.
So to your point about the verdict, what is the film's verdict or the director's verdict? I guess that's all not real. In reality, he's sitting in this torture chair, imagining that he's blown it all up and that there's some brighter tomorrow on the other edge. And in some ways, that's the sort of G.I. Joe hero kind of myth. That the end result of somebody thinking that they can do on their own, fix the world and forget all this system stuff, is basically a dream. It's a dream state, right? And it's a dream that involves destroying everything and running away to some pasture. But honestly, we've talked about this before, I think, people sort of throw around the revolution thing, but people have never been hunted as a criminal. If you really want to start a revolution, that's what you're asking for, right? If you've never gone to target practice and fired a gun, you're not going to last very long in the revolution. Right. If you don't know how to grow food, once you blow up the food system, what are you going to eat, right? Which is, I think, the Killer Mike verse, right?
We brag on having bread, but none of us are bakers. We all talk having greens, but none of us own acres. If none of us own acres and none of us grow wheat, then who will feed our people when our people need to eat? So it seems our people starve. from lack of understanding. Cause all we seem to give them is symbolic.
Right? Like, how are people going to eat? Like, so in a way, I feel like the verdict of the movie is that there is no lone wolf hero to save you and blow the whole thing up. There is ignoring it, doing your job like everybody else. Mm-hmm. There is losing your mind and going off on some dream thing. Mm-hmm. Or what? I don't know that the director knows what else there is.
Mm-hmm. What there isn't was any indication that incremental change is an option.
Right.
That was not part of this film at all.
Right. Yeah.
It was either stay in it or blow it up.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there was also a lot about what drives people to want to blow up the system.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in Sam's case, it wasn't being disgruntled enough with the system to blow it up. It was really for him a personal vested interest.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was. I think what the director is trying to say is that it's love. He feels alone, and like there's no human attachment that's real in his life.
Yeah.
Like he's in love with this imaginary vision of this girl who isn't even anything really like the girl that he actually ends up with, and like that's what he's pursuing. He's pursuing love in the same way that like the mom is pursuing youth, right? Like he's got his dream that he's pursuing, and there's no incremental change because like everybody has given up on change. Yeah. They've just kind of accepted it and kind of look at you like you're crazy if you don't accept it. Mm-hmm. Or I guess you can be like a terrorist and blow things up, right? It's sort of the two options offered in the film. Yeah, so shifting gears a little bit, how about we try to make the connection from this sort of very, very strange movie that we just watched to like our day-to-day lives. So is there anything in the film that you find really connecting to like your experience being in the bureaucracy? I mean, we just sort of talked about this like, you know, two opposites of like blowing everything up or just like ignoring it all, like and where's that like in between or whatever, or maybe there's something else from the movie that like really spoke to like your experience in the bureaucracy. I can certainly think of a couple, but I think you guys are probably more interesting for our listeners than we are.
Can I start with something very simple and physical?
Sure.
Yes.
In the film, there were every single hallway had those small square like translucent windows that are so public school. Yeah. And every time I saw one, the film was no longer ridiculous. It was very real. And I was like, oh my God, I walked those hallways so many times.
It's like these little square kind of privacy glass things that you can't see through, but like the light comes in or whatever.
6 inches to a foot thick.
And so it kind of gives you this feeling almost of like chicken wire or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to jump in there because there's something related that we all reacted to. There was a scene where right after Sam gets his promotion, I love this scene, he gets up and he's seeing this group of people walk by. Like they're walking by in the hall and they're all chasing after somebody, right? And you start to recognize that the person they're chasing after is like the boss of the floor. And finally, Sam catches up to them. He's trying to get a word in edgewise and chasing after. And the guy who's in charge says to Sam, "Oh, we're glad you're here." He says, "We've got a crack team of decision makers here." And I'm like, which is great. Like I could so relate to that. Yeah. Like we're all decision makers who are chasing after him for a decision.
Right.
Like and that bottleneck, right?
Yeah.
And then the next thing he says is they get to his office and he says, "I think you'll like it up here. You've got your very own door with your very own number, and behind that door is your very own office." Yeah. And he walks into the office, and it's like half an office,
which he's sharing a desk through the wall with someone else. What?
Yeah.
And then my favorite thing about the decision thing is that then his like gift is a little toy where it winds up a little thing, and then it clicks and falls down, and it falls down yes or no.
Right.
Yeah.
So the decisions are just random.
Yeah. And there are levels of random decisions.
Yes, there are levels of random decisions.
All probably using the same technique.
Sure. Same technique.
So I brought it way back into the movie, but I want to then like bring it back out. Like, obviously, there's so much of that feels real.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous, but it's so real.
I think that Abram, to your question, the thing or the person that I identify most with would be like Sam himself, like you see kind of his progression to radicalism throughout the whole, I identify with the feeling that he had in the beginning of feeling like a cog in the system almost, where it's like, when he looked back and realized what he said to the daughter, that was kind of like his moment of, wow. I think that's the logic behind like pathological lying, where it's like you start believing your own lies.
Right.
And so like sometimes when you're coping with things, you start coping with them to the extent that it's your second nature reaction. And then you look up in 2 years and you realize, you're like, where am I? Like where are my passions? Who am I as a person? What do I provide to this position other than what has been like kind of prescribed to me?
Yeah.
And like I fully can feel that. Like I'm a little bit younger in the game in terms of my experience in the Department of Education, or my experience in this field in general, and there is that feeling of just utter like disdain at times, where it's like, feeling like nobody is really acknowledging the culture of silence that we're constantly existing within, or like I'm the type to vocalize my opinion, but if I notice other people vocalizing and they've seen like repercussions for doing so, even if what they're saying is just their lived reality, it can become like, all right, well, it makes more sense for me to silence myself so that I can get, the pension and all of the benefits of whatever program you're in. It makes sense to silence yourself, and because there's a certain culture that exists there, and when you come in, it's either like, and we saw it in the film, where it's like you either assimilate or you will be ousted, and that makes it more difficult. And Toni, me and you were just talking about like, it's almost like complacency or complicity chooses the path of least resistance. And so if you have a fear of having that like pressure, or having that like ousting for being that one that isn't assimilating, you lean towards experiencing that. But if you lean towards experiencing that, you're also leaning towards complicity, because then you learn the ways of the land, and you're silencing yourself, you're losing parts of yourself. And I felt like I was doing that, like I felt like I was doing that every day when I came in the office sometimes. And maybe it's in my head. Maybe it's just my experiences as a black man growing up in the world, where that double consciousness forces me to think of, wow, like I am not myself here, and I am aware of that, and I do it every day, to the point where it's like, oh, well, this is just what work is,
and like you don't know any better, right? Like you spend 20 years or whatever, like going through school and all this stuff with everybody telling you the real world is coming, and then like, how do you know this isn't just what everybody goes through?
Right.
Because it kind of looks like it's what everybody goes through.
And like in many situations, the older heads in the situation will reinforce, because their experience was what it is. And so that's not, it's not necessarily a fault to them. That is the experience that they've had. But, I feel like, especially being in the field of education, we are committing to being lifelong learners. Being a social worker in general is a commitment to lifelong learning. That's what like culturally responsive education is about. It's like, we grew up in a situation that we felt was oppressive. So how do we then validate passing that on?
You just said a lot. I'm not sure which piece to build on, but
we say a lot of things on this podcast.
I say a lot of things on this podcast. But I'm thinking about the idea of being able to hold both. And to be able to escape, but also hold the position at the same time. And I'm thinking about Sam's position to accept the promotion, not because he wanted the promotion or the work, but because he wanted access.
Right. Yeah.
And so I've often been thinking about, I don't want to give any spoilers, but I also recently saw Sorry to Bother You, and there are a lot of similar.
I need to see this.
Like, I don't know how many spoilers we're doing here, but
don't spoil that.
There's definitely a conversation in this movie about what level of access, how many times do you need to sell your soul, and what level of access do you need to have to accomplish the things you want to accomplish. And I've definitely felt held back in my own career by ending up on a career path that I didn't have passion for. But once you're on a career path, the easiest way to climb is by staying on that track. And there's like no way to sidestep. And I was able to sidestep, which is like very rare. But I watched my peers climb ahead of me and take on director positions and stuff because they wanted to continue in that field, or at least were willing to, and I wasn't willing to be the face of the type of work that I was so conflicted about already. And so the result was that I really stayed stagnant in the same kind of position, in the same field for longer than I needed to.
Right.
Because I didn't know where to go, and I didn't know how to hold both.
Right.
So it's an interesting, I don't know, it's an interesting tension.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked before, I think, on the podcast about the idea of, like, what does integrity mean? Mm-hmm. And, like, what does it mean to be an integrated person, to just remain one person and not to be fake, not to put on the baby mask or whatever, not to put on the mask that lets you get away with in your own mind the like things that you're committing, but to be a person who holds their integrity and who holds some kind of office of this kind of bureaucratic tiny piece of the system power, but with integrity. What does that look like? Because that's not really how we're socialized. We're socialized very much to look out for number one, to make sure we get ours, get our pension, take care of our family, whatever. And I don't, I'm not down on families. Like, you very much definitely have to take care of what you have to take care of. As a close departed friend of mine would commonly say all the time, you've got to watch the bag. You got to be careful. You've got to be careful to make sure that you've got yours for when it goes down. So I'm not down on getting your paycheck, making sure you have your pension or whatever. But there's this thing about, and I think it was Vinny Schiraldi that said it in a previous episode of the podcast. If you're worried about like losing this job, or you're worried about like not getting the next job after this one, you're not going to do what you need to do to like really do the job with your integrity. And he was saying, Vinny Schiraldi was saying how he never expected that he would work for the government. He never had any interest in working for the government again. So that allowed him to really fully live into his integrity and accomplish a lot. And to me, that's where, what you're saying, Toni, resonates so much. Oftentimes I feel like I really just need to like focus, do one thing, commit to it, get better at it, be the best at that one thing, and that's how I'll get sort of attention, power, access, etc. But it's got to be a thing that's integrity. It's got to be a thing that matches my values, that lets me be my real, whole, integrated self. Otherwise, like you're saying, I'm just wasting my time and everybody else's time too.
Since you're talking about your whole integrated self, I want to talk for a minute about those baby masks.
What was that about?
Oh man,
this super creepy like Chucky something baby mask, right?
It wasn't even Chucky. I mean, is it me, or was there like a lot of Asian imagery with regard to like the monsters in this movie?
Yeah, there's like a samurai.
Yeah, I did at one point. I did have that thought that those masks did look.
So what do you think?
What I'm present to is when you talk about integrity, so the kind of the worst acts that were carried out in the movie were done behind masks, so that the person doing the act didn't have to
take the mask off.
They could separate. It didn't have to be them committing the act, but they also could remain like faceless to the person.
Yeah, it's the executioner. Yeah,
they were doing it too.
It's the helmet that the police officer is like, it's so sweaty, I can't see through it.
It's the uniform.
But
it's not me.
Right, and as soon as they take the mask off, they're like, they're like regular people talking to each other.
So when you talk about being your whole integrated self, that's
the mask.
The opposite of
in
that.
a way, yeah.
It's not the kind of integration we're talking about here.
Right. Yeah. So there is an integration that is wearing the mask. It's a sense of like being in the same space but being assimilated to what Patrick is saying, right?
Because in that conversation, like when I'm hearing integrity and like, a lot of to rise positions, you need to build credibility. Yeah. And oftentimes credibility and vulnerability cannot exist.
Yeah, they don't go together. Yeah.
That's right. But at the same time, when we clock out of work, we're not attracted, or at least I'm not attracted to people who act as if they have all the answers. I'm attracted to vulnerability. I'm attracted to people who are still struggling through things, because then maybe I can provide something. And you know what? That heightens my engagement in our friendship or our whatever we're talking about, because everybody wants to feel like they're involved, like or that their voice matters. It's so there's a social critic. His name is Jay Smooth, and he talks about why it's so difficult to talk about race. And one of the things he says is like, you know, we need to start thinking of race as the way we think of like cleanliness, where it's like, you know, you wouldn't say, oh, I'm a clean person because I took a shower in 2005.
And in general, I think we need to move away from the premise that being a good person is a fixed, immutable characteristic, and shift towards seeing being good as a practice. And it is a practice that we carry out by engaging with our imperfections. So we need to shift towards thinking of being a good person the same way we think of being a clean person. Being a clean person is something that you maintain and work on every day. We don't assume that I'm a clean person, therefore I don't need to brush my teeth. And when someone suggests to us that we've got something stuck in our teeth, we don't say, what do you mean? I have something stuck in my teeth, I'm a clean person. Why would you? So I know that this is no small task, but if we can shift a little bit closer towards viewing those race conversations the same way we view a conversation about something stuck in our teeth, it will go a long way towards making our conversations a bit smoother.
You know what I mean? Like if you think you're a clean person, it's because you took a shower probably this morning and you brush your teeth, but it's a daily maintenance. You know, it takes that. And so when we talk about race, we talk about it as like, well, I'm not racist because you're either racist or you're perfect talking about race. You know, where is the ground to expose the biases that we're trying to, you know, like combat? And so like in a world where there is no in between, like what you were saying in terms of the where is the room for incremental change? If there's no room for like something that isn't as black and white as like I am this or I'm the opposite of that, it causes a culture of silence, you know, to because you don't want to expose yourself. You know,
the same is true of gender. And speaking of Sorry to Bother You, Boots Riley has a line in Steal This Album. He says, I used to think that women were saints, hoes, and skeezers.
To me, women had to be saints, hoes, and skeezers. And I don't think that it's going to end till we make revolution. But who gonna make the shit if we worship prostitution?
Right? Like you can only go one way or the other. Right? So look, this is the finale of our season, and it's been so awesome to have you guys here.
Absolutely.
And I, tying it back to the movie, I think that one thing we talked about before was Sam's solitary existence. And one thing that you referenced when we started, Patrick, was how through the process of this podcast, we've been dialoguing with people and bringing people in. And our last podcast, actually, the last one that we taped anyway, was about love. And what does love mean in the bureaucracy? And I just had the sensation that, you know, the thing that Sam was never able to do for himself was find community. And I think that the most radical thing that I've done since I've been working in this bureaucracy is find my community.
I concur.
It just makes me really happy, man. Like, and it's like, I don't know how that translates into systemic change. I kind of have to have faith that it does on some level. I know that it gives me energy. It gives me sustainability. It makes me think of things in new ways. But I love that we're living it out right here. And in contrast to Sam, like poor Sam never got to sit around and like drink beers and like talk about
this weird movie.
Movie Sam versus reality Sam.
Oh, that would have been like very bizarre, right?
And that's often the hardest piece of being in bureaucracy and and having a struggle is feeling like, am I crazy? Is it really happening? And just having one other person to just say, it's happening.
Just one.
Just one person.
The difference between crazy and leadership is like not being alone. Having 100%. One more person who's like, this is real.
And that's a really important part of love and community.
Yes.
Just like that connection.
I think that is the perfect place to end season 1 of The Radical Bureaucrat. Thank you guys so much for being on the show.
Toni Smith-Thompson and Patrick G. Williamson.
It's an honor. It's truly an honor.
Yeah, thanks guys for listening.
This was dope.
Thank you, listeners. Abram, thank you, man.
Yeah, we did it.
We did it. We'll do it when it's all edited, but we did it.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.